The air in that attorney's office smelled like furniture polish and old paper. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that gray institutional glow that makes every surface look the same. I sat across from my wife Rebecca and her lawyer, a woman in a navy suit who kept tapping her pen against a yellow legal pad. Rebecca was checking her phone, scrolling with her thumb, not looking at me. She'd worn the burgundy cardigan I'd given her for our 15th anniversary. I noticed that. The lawyer cleared her throat and said the words I'd been waiting to hear for 3 weeks. Mr. Patterson, your wife is seeking full ownership of the marital home, half of all retirement accounts, and spousal support based on the lifestyle she's maintained during the marriage. Rebecca finally looked up from her phone. She smiled, not cruel, just confident, and said to her lawyer, loud enough for me to hear, "He has nothing. This won't take long." My hands rested flat on the table. I didn't clench them. I didn't speak. My attorney Martin shifted slightly in his chair beside me, but I'd already told him what to expect. They thought this was over before it started. They were wrong. My name is David Patterson. I'm 52 years old, and for 23 years I worked in logistics management for a regional freight company. Nothing glamorous. Routes, schedules, compliance reports. The kind of work that keeps shelves stocked and nobody notices until something goes wrong. Rebecca and I had been married for 19 years. High school sweethearts who found each other again at a class reunion when we were both 29. Those first few years felt stable, comfortable. We bought the house on Maple Street with the big backyard. We hosted Thanksgivings. We took one vacation a year, usually somewhere with a beach and a rental car. On the surface, it worked. But surfaces can hide erosion for a long time. I started noticing the small things maybe 5 years in. Rebecca would make plans without asking me first, then tell me about them at dinner like they were already decided. "We're going to your sister's on Saturday," she'd say, not, "Would you want to go?" When I'd suggest something, a weekend trip, a restaurant I'd rate about, she'd nod politely and then never bring it up again. My salary went into our joint account every 2 weeks. Hers from her part-time work at the library went into a separate account she called her personal fund. I paid the mortgage, utilities, car insurance, groceries. She paid for things she wanted. I never questioned it. I thought that was partnership. At dinner parties, she'd tell stories where I was either absent or the punchline. "David thought we could retire on his pension," she'd laugh, and everyone would smile. I let it go. I let a lot go. The real betrayal didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly, like water behind a dam. But the moment it broke was specific. We were in the kitchen on a Tuesday evening in March. I'd just gotten home from a compliance audit that had taken 14 hours. Rebecca was at the table with her laptop open, talking on her phone. When she hung up, she didn't look at me. She said, "I've been talking to an attorney. I want a divorce." I set my keys down on the counter. I asked her why. She exhaled like I'd asked something tedious. "David, I haven't been happy in years. You're just there. You don't challenge me. You don't excite me. I need more than this." I asked her if there was someone else. She paused, took a sip of her tea and said, "That's not the point. The point is I deserve better than settling." I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I asked what she wanted. She told me she'd already drafted a separation agreement. She wanted the house because she'd invested emotionally in it. She wanted half of my 401k and pension. She wanted spousal support because she'd sacrificed career opportunities to support my stability. She slid the papers across the table. I read them standing there in the kitchen, under the pendant lights we'd picked out together at a home store 7 years earlier. The numbers didn't make sense. She'd listed my salary accurately but had somehow missed the other accounts. The properties, the investments I'd made separately, quietly, over 15 years. I signed the acknowledgement of receipt, not the agreement, just the receipt. She looked surprised that I didn't fight. She said, "I thought you'd make this difficult." I told her I wouldn't. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. I moved out that weekend. Not far, a furnished studio apartment near the industrial park. the kind of place with beige carpets and Venetian blinds that never quite close all the way. I brought one suitcase, my laptop, and a folder of documents I'd kept in my office filing cabinet. The first night I sat at the small kitchen table and went through everything methodically. Bank statements, property deeds, stock portfolios, receipts. I'd been careful for a long time, not secretive, just private. Rebecca had never asked about my finances beyond the joint account, so I'd never volunteered. My grandfather had taught me early, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I'd been preparing since I was 30. I called Martin Fisher the next morning. He was a corporate attorney I'd worked with during a company merger 8 years prior. Steady, precise, no drama. I explained the situation in under 5 minutes. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. "How much does she think you have?" I told him. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "And how much do you actually have?" I told him that too. He said, "Understood. Don't communicate with her except through me. Don't respond to texts, calls, nothing. Document everything, but stay silent." I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. Rebecca started texting 2 days later. First, practical questions about the water bill and the lawn service. Then, emotional messages. "I know this is hard for you. We can still be civil. I hope you're okay." I screenshotted each one and forwarded them to Martin. I didn't reply. A week later, her mother called. She told me I was being cruel and selfish, that Rebecca was heartbroken, that I owed her more respect after everything she'd given me. I thanked her for calling and hung up. Her best friend Lindsay sent an email saying I was financially abusing Rebecca by refusing to engage. I forwarded it to Martin. He replied with 2 words, "Stay quiet." The legal process moved like freight, slow, deliberate, impossible to reverse once it's in motion. Martin filed our response to her petition in early April. Rebecca's attorney received it on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone was buzzing with messages from Rebecca. "What is this? You're claiming separate property? My lawyer says you're hiding assets." I checked the time, 2:47 p.m. I turned my phone face down and went back to work. Martin scheduled a deposition for late April. Formal discovery. Both sides would present financial affidavits, documentation, evidence of assets and debts. I took the day off work. The deposition was held in a conference room at Martin's firm. Glass walls, dark wood table, leather chairs that didn't squeak. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes late with her attorney, Diane, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd built a reputation on high-conflict divorces. Rebecca looked tired. She'd lost weight. She didn't make eye contact when she sat down. Diane started the questioning. Standard stuff: employment history, income sources, accounts I'd had access to during the marriage. I answered every question plainly, without elaboration. Then she asked about the safety deposit box. Her tone changed slightly, more pointed. "Mr. Patterson, you listed a safety deposit box at First Federal Bank under your name only. What's inside it?" Martin glanced at me. I told her I'd prefer to inventory it with both attorneys present. Diane leaned forward. "Is there a reason you're being evasive?" I wasn't being evasive. I was being precise. Martin cut in. "My client has offered transparency. If you'd like to schedule a time to open the box together, we're available tomorrow." Rebecca finally spoke. She looked at Diane and said, almost laughing, "He has nothing. He's bluffing. David doesn't hide things. He doesn't even balance the checkbook without asking me first." Diane nodded, but I saw doubt flicker across her face. Martin didn't react. He just made a note on his legal pad and said, "Tomorrow at 10, First Federal Downtown Branch." That night I barely slept. Not from anxiety, from clarity. I'd kept that box for 16 years. Every document inside represented a decision Rebecca never knew I'd made. I hadn't hidden anything illegal or dishonest. I'd just been careful, deliberate. I'd invested inheritance money from my grandfather separately. I'd purchased 2 rental properties in my name before we married and never commingled the income. I'd kept my stock portfolio in accounts Rebecca never asked about because she assumed I had nothing worth asking about. The next morning smelled like rain. The bank lobby was bright and cold, the kind of institutional clean that makes everyone speak in hushed tones. Martin and I arrived first. Rebecca and Diane came in 5 minutes later. The bank manager, a man named Eugene with wire-rimmed glasses, escorted us to the vault. He unlocked the gate, checked my ID, and retrieved box 447. We walked to a private room, 4 walls, 1 table, fluorescent overhead. Eugene set the box on the table and left. I opened it slowly. Inside were folders, each labeled and organized by year. Property deeds for 2 rental homes in the neighboring county, purchased in 2008 and 2011. Combined current value approximately $670,000. Stock certificates and portfolio statements showing investments I'd made separately since 2007. Current value approximately $430,000. Life insurance policy documents with my sister listed as beneficiary. Cash value $85,000. My grandfather's original will, leaving me $120,000 outright in 2006, before Rebecca and I married. Every deposit slip, every transaction record, every tax return showing separate filing status for those assets. Diane's expression changed as she flipped through the first folder. Rebecca's face went pale. She looked at me, then at the documents, then back at me. "What is this?" Her voice was thin, almost a whisper. I said, "Assets I acquired and maintained separately throughout the marriage. All documented, all legally separate property." Diane kept reading, her pen moving fast across her notepad. Rebecca stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loud against the tile floor. "You've been hiding this from me for years?" I didn't stand. I kept my voice level. "I never hid anything. You never asked." She started pacing. Diane put a hand up, trying to calm her, but Rebecca wasn't hearing it. "This is insane. We were married. You were supposed to share everything with me." I told her I'd shared everything she'd asked about. The joint account, the house down payment, the vacations, the daily expenses. These assets were mine before we married or acquired through inheritance and kept separate intentionally. It wasn't hiding, it was planning. Diane cleared her throat and said, "Mr. Patterson, these assets would still be subject to division, depending on commingling and—" Martin interrupted. "There's no commingling. Every account, every property, every investment was maintained separately with separate funds. No marital money ever touched these assets. This is textbook separate property under state law." Rebecca sat back down. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Diane and said, "Can he do this? Can he just—" Diane cut her off gently. "If everything here is documented as he says, and if there's no commingling, then yes, these assets would remain his sole property." Rebecca's face flushed red. She turned to me, and for the first time in months, I saw something real in her eyes. Not anger, fear. "David, please, we can work this out. I didn't mean—" I stood up then. I looked at her directly. "You told your lawyer I had nothing. You told your mother I was cruel. You told your friends I was abusive. You built a case around the assumption that I was weak and you were owed. You chose who mattered when you said you deserved better than settling." I picked up one of the folders and handed it to Martin. "This meeting is over." I walked out first. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't look back. Martin followed me into the hallway. We stood by the elevators in silence for a moment. Then he said, "That was the cleanest walkout I've seen in 20 years. I told him I didn't feel victorious. I felt unburdened. The divorce finalized 4 months later. Rebecca received her portion of the joint account and a small settlement to cover her transition costs. I kept the house because I'd paid the down payment with separate funds and could prove the mortgage had been paid from my income alone. She moved into an apartment near the library. We never spoke again after that day in the bank. Martin told me she tried to reopen negotiations twice, but Diane advised her the case was unwinnable. One Saturday morning in September, I changed the locks on the house. I hired a locksmith who didn't ask questions, just handed me 3 new keys and left. I made coffee in the kitchen that had felt so heavy for so long. The sunlight came through the window differently now, cleaner, sharper. I sat at the table and felt the quiet settle around me. Not emptiness, clarity. I thought about Rebecca sometimes, not with bitterness, with something closer to sadness. She'd built an entire narrative where I was passive, where I had nothing, where she held all the power. And I'd let her believe it because correcting her felt like effort I didn't want to spend. Maybe I should have said something sooner. Maybe I should have challenged the small dismissals before they became a foundation. But silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. If you had been in my place, would you have revealed everything earlier to save the marriage? Or would you have stayed quiet and let the truth surface when it mattered most? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence means more than you know. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. Let's keep walking this road together.